You start in the woods and you make it to your skiff. You go from your skiff to another island. The real reason Bear Brown disappeared from Alaskan Bush People will leave you stunned. Known as the loudest and most energetic of the Brown family, Bear's presence lit up every scene. But behind the wild energy was a storm he kept hidden from the cameras. In this video, we uncover the heartbreaking struggles he faced in private, from personal battles to moments that nearly broke him. Nothing was as it seemed. Stay tuned as we reveal the untold truth about Bear Brown's disappearance. Where did Bear go? Bear Brown was never the kind of guy you could miss for any reason. If you have ever watched Alaskan Bush People, you already know that he wasn't just a cast member, but a force from the Brown family. A wild, loud, impulsive, intense, and strangely lovable person. He sprinted barefoot through forests like a kid high on freedom, shouted extreme at everything, from chopping wood to chasing squirrels, and climbed trees like a half animal and half adrenaline. He's someone that people could barely understand. Bear didn't just live in the wild. He was the wild. One day he was there, loud and chaotic and bouncing off the trees. The next day he was gone. There was no warning, no goodbye posts, or even a mysterious teaser saying, "I'll be back." His Instagram was quiet and there was no mention of his discovery. His family was vague and peaceful, too. First, the fans thought maybe it was just one of Bear's things. Perhaps he was unplugging for a while or working on something behind the scenes. But the days stretched into weeks, and the weeks stretched into months, and as his absence grew longer, something started to sink in for the people who truly followed him. Bear Brown hadn't just disappeared from social media. He had disappeared from life. And that was really unlike him. Bear loved his fans. He loved connecting. He was constantly posting blurry selfies, making emotional videos in the dark, or going on intense rants about family, freedom, or pain. So, when it all stopped cold with no explanation, hint, nothing, something felt wrong. Not like he's taking time off, wrong. More like he's not okay, wrong. The truth is that Bear did not just vanish. He cracked and no one saw it happen. Not his followers, not the producers, maybe not even his family. Bear was always the very wild one, the noisy one, the one who made everything feel less severe. But people didn't understand that sometimes the loudest people carry the deepest pain. And when Bear finally reached his breaking point, it wasn't with some dramatic explosion. It was with silence. Because he was exhausted from pretending and performing. The acting was wearing him off. And he was tired of being Bear Brown, the character, when all he wanted to be was just Bear, the person. And that's not a switch you can flip. It's a slow unraveling that happens inside when no one's looking. Bear had been carrying pain for years. It didn't just start with his father's death, but that's when it became impossible to hide. Billy Brown wasn't just Bear's dad. He was his best friend, teacher, biggest supporter, and hero. Losing him wasn't just grief. It was like someone pulled the ground out from under his feet. And even though Bear posted the tributes, said the right things, kept up the image, he was drowning. Behind every wheel carry on was a boy who no longer knew where to go. Because how do you keep being extreme when your entire world just stopped? Bear tried to go on. He tried so hard. He pushed himself through the episodes and kept posting. He even threw himself into his rocky relationship with Raven, hoping anything would give him solid ground again. But the hits kept coming. The relationship fell apart and the public scrutiny got even worse. People called him unstable, childish, and dangerous. And while the world kept watching like it was entertainment, Bear was unraveling in real time. He just didn't have the words to say it. Because for someone like Bear, who's built his identity around being wild and invincible, admitting pain feels like defeat, so he smiled through it. He posted blurry photos with captions like, "Stay strong." He tried to stay visible, even when it hurt, but it wasn't sustainable. Grief doesn't care about how strong you act, and heartbreak doesn't wait for camera crews to leave. So one day he just stopped. He didn't bother to post anything anymore. He didn't even explain it to anybody. He just shut down the noise and disappeared. And the saddest part is that nobody truly noticed until he was already gone. The headlines didn't scream it, nor did Discovery rush to explain it. Even fans assumed it was just a phase. But Bear wasn't staging a comeback. He wasn't even plotting a rebrand. He was doing his best to survive, at least, because disappearing wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of mercy for himself. He had spent years being the wild, the extreme, the one who turned pain into noise and heartache into adventure. But when you give and give and give until there's nothing left, disappearing is the only way to stop the bleeding. It's not about drama. It's about peace. That's why Bear left. The wild man was hurting in silence. Behind every extreme was a heart that never healed. When Billy passed, Bear lost more than a father. He even lost his map. In trying to find himself again, he got lost in the noise of everyone else's expectations. So he turned everything off. What broke him? Most people thought they understood Bear Brown's grief. They saw the headlines when Billy Brown passed away. They watched the tribute episodes on Alaskan Bush People. They heard the family say, "Dad would want us to keep going." And Bear said just the same thing. He smiled for the cameras and posted about legacy and strength. But what nobody understood, even his fans missed, was that Bear didn't just lose a father. He lost the only person who ever truly understood him. Bear and Billy were more than just father and son. They were mirrors of each other. They had the same wild spirit, passion for nature, freedom, and living outside the rules. Billy was the only one who never asked Bear to quiet, calm down, and stop being so much. He didn't just tolerate Bear's intensity. He celebrated it and called it fire. He even began seeing it as a gift. And when Billy was around, Bear had a home, even when they were out in the middle of nowhere. Because that's precisely what Billy was. For Bear, home. So when Billy passed, a piece of Bear passed away too. There was a void in Bear for a very long while, which only Billy could fill. Months later, Bear thought he had healed, and everyone felt so until the ache returned. Silence in the pain of trying to speak and not knowing who to say it to. Bear wanted to keep it together. He tried to hold the family up. He tried to be still the wild man everyone expected. But there's only so long you can hold everyone else before your arms start shaking. And Bear's started shaking way earlier than anyone realized. Behind the scenes, he was unraveling slowly, posting less on his social media page, and smiling less. He constantly got caught in emotional storms on social media, then disappeared again. His relationship with Raven went up and down like a storm tide. Fans started criticizing him and calling him unstable, saying he was too emotional, too erratic, but they didn't know the whole story because the grief didn't make sense to them. So, when someone, like Bear, who's been taught to turn pain into performance, finally gets overwhelmed, he simply implodes from the inside out. There were days when Bear couldn't get out of bed and nights when all he did was cry alone with no cameras, family, or fans. It was just the dark and the questions and the hollow feeling of knowing that the one man who had always had his back was never coming back. And the most challenging part was that even amid all of these, Bear felt he wasn't allowed to fall apart publicly because he was Bear Brown, the wild, the loud, the strong. He was supposed to keep going and keep being okay like everyone thought that he was. Little did they know that he was slowly dying, and pretending only made it worse. The grief wasn't just emotional, it was a physical one. The Bear lost weight and looked exhausted. His voice was beginning to fade, and his face, once so expressive and animated, began to look haunted. He was there, but not there because he was already slowly fading. What broke him wasn't just the loss. It was the way the world expected him to survive it without collapsing. People told him to be strong and move forward. They told him your dad would want you to keep going. Maybe that's true, but no one told him it was okay to stop. No one said, you don't have to carry this alone. Nobody offered a shoulder to lean on. He was just there, facing his thing and carrying his cross alone. And Bear didn't know how to pause. No one had ever taught him that. He had been taught to run, to build, to scream, to fight, but never to sit in the pain and feel it. So when the pain finally came, and it came like a wave, Bear did the only thing his heart understood, the pressure. For most of his life, Bear Brown was seen as big entertainment. He was the wild and unfiltered one who made people laugh, gasp, and wonder how a man could live like that on Earth and still smile. Fans loved him because he was different, but still, he wasn't polished. He was not quiet and didn't follow the script. He was Bear, and that was enough until it wasn't. Because what nobody tells you is that being loved by millions can be just as heavy as being hated. When you become someone's favorite, someone's escape and symbol of strength, you no longer get to fall apart. You no longer get to be human. And Bear, for all his fire and noise, was very human. The truth is, Bear never really had a break. Emotionally, not even mentally. He didn't get to slow down after his dad died and didn't get to breathe when his relationship crumbled. He couldn't sit peacefully without someone watching, judging, or commenting. He was grieving, confused, heartbroken, and exhausted. But the world wanted extreme. The world wanted energy. The world wanted a show. Even the people closest to him, his fans, his network, and maybe even his family, didn't realize what they were asking him to do. They didn't know that they were cajoling him into bleeding for their comfort, to keep turning his real life into a character so they could stay entertained. But Bear couldn't do it anymore. He didn't have the strength to continue. So the more he tried, the more it ate him from the inside. There's something deeply lonely about being the loud one. People begin to think that you're strong simply because you speak loud, move fast, and make jokes. But sometimes the loudest people are the ones who are most scared. They cover the silence in their heads with noise and cause chaos because stillness feels like drowning. That's how Bear lived. He was always running from something he couldn't even name. And eventually, the Running wore out. Privately, Bear began spiraling. He started lashing out. Online, his Instagram post became cryptic, dark, and sometimes aggressive. One day he'd be full of love and gratitude, and the next he'd be angry, accusing people of betrayal, begging for peace, and then deleting everything. Within hours, it was an earnest plea for attention and a cry for help. But instead of compassion, people mocked and called him an unstable person. They said he was losing it and ruining his dad's legacy. The weight of those words nearly crushed him. Imagine carrying your father's name, his dream, his wilderness, and now you're being told you're failing it. You, the wildest one, who tried hardest to be like him, are now a disgrace to him and the entire family. That kind of accusation doesn't hurt on the surface. It burns deep within the soul. While the world patiently and cruelly watched him spiral. One moment that broke him completely was that nobody even tried standing up for him. Everybody believed he was wrong and doing poorly. It wasn't televised nor dramatic, and it didn't involve shouting, lawsuits, or cameras. It only happened in total silence late one night, alone, far from anyone, just Bear. And the reality that nobody saw him anymore. Maybe not even the people he loved. At that moment, something inside Bear gave out. He sat with the noise in his head, with all the guilt,